Right Wing Watch uncovered this gem from yesterday's 700 Club. Yes, it's Pat Robertson. He's back in the news once again. You remember, this is the same guy that I've poked fun on this program previously, for saying that there are gay people in San Francisco who are going around poking people with this ring and injecting the AIDS virus into various people. That Pat Robertson. Well, yesterday on the 700 Club, he actually said this. Okay? Here we go. Let me turn this off and turn this on.
The Republicans have got to wave the white flag and say, we fought a good fight, now it's over. They cannot shut the government down and then bring about a default. We can't do it. I mean, it would be devastating economically to every human being, and the Republicans just can't get tired with that. So they tried, and if they go to the electorate and say, we tried, Obamacare was awful, we tried to get it underway, and we weren't successful. The Democrats wanted it, they fought for it, and they wouldn't let go. So it's their bill, their program.
Now, as I said on yesterday's program, I don't believe in the end times scenario. But if there is an end times scenario, it's when Pat Robertson says that the Republicans have gone too far. I can't believe he actually admitted that, but he's right. The Republicans are basically sore losers in this, and I've said that repeatedly on this program, and to that effect. But when you lose the support of Pat Robertson in your right-wing extremism, you've got a problem with your message. And more importantly, I think you've got a problem with your philosophy. But I thank you, Karen, for sending that. And, wow. I never thought I'd hear Pat Robertson admit that. Anyway, other items in the news. Speaking of the government shutdown, onto a more serious aspect of it. And the U.S. government is expected to tap out its credit cards at midnight tonight unless there's a deal reached in Washington, D.C. today. And so far, it looks like it's pretty much the same old stalemate over and over again. But, I'm keeping my fingers crossed that something will happen before midnight tonight. But we shall see as the day progresses. The wearily and difficult process of trying to make a deal resumes today, as the government is now in its 16th day of the partial shutdown. Legislators dropped hints on their way home yesterday that Senate leaders will present a deal to raise the debt ceiling and reopen the partially shuttered government. A Republican member of the House of Representatives is holding out hope that Speaker John Boehner could break with a Republican tradition to put that deal on a fast track. According to Mitch McConnell and Harry Reid, according to Republican Representative Charlie Dent of Pennsylvania, he says, I believe that John Boehner will likely be in a position where he will have to essentially pass the bill that is negotiated between Senators Mitch McConnell and Senators Harry Reid. So what could happen next? Well, of course, if we don't pass the budget tomorrow, there's the possibility we're going to default on some of our debts, on our bills. And the way our economy is structured, the way the government has the federal budget set up, I think we're already past that point anyway. It's just that our creditors say as long as you keep the money flowing, well, we're not going to care too much. But another Republican representative, Steve King of Iowa, says GOP lawmakers intend to stand tough to save the country from what they consider to be an out-of-control spending habit. And that midnight deadline to raise the nation's self-imposed borrowing limit, not that big of a deal, he told CNN News. Here's my problem. Another problem I've just realized. You have lawmakers who are saying that we have out-of-control spending. Yet during this whole damn shutdown, these bastards are getting paid to say that we're overspending. Well, you're the dumb fuckers that are passing these bills, that are approving these bills, often without looking over the fine print. And I know a lot of these bills are dozens, if not hundreds of pages long. You don't have time to read through them all. You're just reading the summary. But if you're stupid enough to pass them, you have no right to complain about government spending getting out of control. You know, it's like saying, going to the bar, well, the bartender got me drunk. Well, you're the dumb idiot that kept consuming the alcohol. So you're the one that got drunk. You're responsible for that, regardless. Well, King went on to say that I don't actually believe it's a hard break today. It's a date they picked on the calendar. Well, for a date that they just picked on the calendar, it sure seems definite to me. But what do I know? A top GOP Senate aide, meanwhile, said leaders in that chamber remain optimistic that an agreement can be reached. This was around 10 o'clock Eastern Time last night. Senate staffers burned the midnight oil to draft a framework bill, and a spokesman for Reid said he and his counterpart, Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, are optimistic that an agreement is within reach. But I said this yesterday on Facebook. I'm getting tired of the sound bites. You know, enough with the sound bites. Get in there and get the job done. You can't go to your boss and hold him off for 3 weeks saying, I'll have it done, or we're working on it. Or the worst thing you can say is, I'm busy. Well, if you're busy, I haven't seen any progress here. And that's a lot of what we're seeing in the nation's capital these days. That they're more interested in hogging the media spotlight and trying to promote themselves for re-election or for a higher office or for another political office. But at the same time, they're not doing what they were elected to do, which is to represent you and me. So enough with the sound bites. Well, you know, it could take a day or two more for a deal to make its way through the legislative process, even if something is agreed upon tonight. By then, though, the nation will likely run out of borrowing authority. While tax revenues will continue to stream in, that money will be enough to pay only part of the government's obligations over time. The impact is still unclear in the immediate short term, but over days and weeks, it could mean that government officials would have to pick and choose which bills to pay and which to leave out for another day. In other words, living from paycheck to paycheck like many of us do right now. Prospect of the U.S. government running out of money to pay its bills and eventually finding it difficult to make payments on the debt itself has economists around the world prophesizing dire consequences. In other words, crapping their pants. And I can't say that I blame them. It's a scary scenario. Well, mutual funds, which are not allowed to hold defaulted securities, may have to dump masses of U.S. treasuries. Ratings agency Fitch fired a warning shot yesterday that it may downgrade the country's AAA credit rating to AA+ over the political brinksmanship and bickering in Washington that have brought the government to this point. That could help raise interest rates on U.S. debt, putting the country further deeper into the red, deeper in debt. Not something you want to hear when you don't have the money available, or really don't have the money at all to pay off your debt. It's like digging a hole, but someone is on behind you, pouring the dirt right back in. That's what's happening here. Well, rating agency Standard & Poor, the S&P, cut the U.S. credit rating from AAA to AA+ after the 2011 debt ceiling crisis. Moody's still has the U.S. rated at AAA. I have a feeling that won't hold, though. Meanwhile, veterans plead for government to reopen the military cemeteries closed around the world. Debt ceiling deadlines affects Richard Quest, explains the debt ceiling. Investors around the world appear to be sitting on the sidelines today, waiting out the day's debates. Asian markets ended with mixed results. European markets were down slightly Friday afternoon, and U.S. stock futures, frequently taken as an indicator for how U.S. markets will open, were up marginally before trading began this morning. So, let's get to the fast track. Now, if House Speaker John Boehner makes the bold political move of putting a Senate deal on the fast track, if that were to happen, which he probably really doesn't have much choice now, he could shoot it over to the Senate for its quick approval, and it could then lateral it to the president to sign it. It could be done in a matter of a couple of hours. But Boehner would probably have to break a Republican tradition, the Hastert Rule, to do that. The informal tenet, named after former House Speaker Dennis Hastert, says that the House Speaker does not introduce legislation unless a majority of Republicans say they will vote for it first. Given the political tension between Democrats and Republicans these days, it's not going to happen. Even right now, when we're faced with this deadline, which is now roughly, 12 hours, 32 minutes from now. Or, 11 hours, 32 minutes. Forgot to take into Eastern Time. So, the tenet, or the Hastert Rule, has served to keep proposals off of the floor, even if they have the prospect of passing via the votes of Democrats combined with those of moderate Republicans. If I were the House Republican leadership, I'd say do away with the Hastert Rule. Don't worry. You undermined due political process 3 weeks ago. Remember that, September 30th? Check back, I believe, on Monday's show of this week, and you'll hear the audio clip of that. Well, House Republicans have expected Boehner to uphold the rule, which I imagine he will, just because he's a loyal Republican. He cares more about the Republican Party than he cares about the American people, which asserts the party's interest in the chamber. And he has pledged to do so. Well, Dent said he hopes Boehner will make an exception and break the Hastert Rule to save the United States from its debt default, and he fears the Speaker will have to if he wants the necessary legislation to pass on time. Even if you hold your ground now, you're eventually going to have to compromise. Your back is against the wall, Mr. Speaker. Do the right thing. Put your ego aside and do the job you were hired to do, that you're selected to do. But I have a feeling he won't. Now that would leave it up to the Democrats to pass along with a contingency of Republicans like himself, Dent, provided Boehner puts it to a vote. Now, if he does, Dent is likely to vote in favor of it alongside many House Democrats that he thinks enough of his moderate Republican colleagues will join him to put it over the top. Now the question is, how many Republicans will be closer to 20 or 75? We still don't know. I feel that it's his basic duty to fund the government and keep it able to pay its debts. Dent says he believes that the majority of House Republicans feel the same way. And so do I. But the challenge is still out there. Now, I know I'm waxing poetically here, and bear with me, okay? This is all things I think we need to think about. When I present information, I like to be as thorough as possible, so bear with me. Well, now there are 2 to 3 dozen members of the House Republican caucus that don't share that ideal. Now, it only takes 2 to 3 dozen to obstruct the will of the majority. Some scholars have suggested that the 14th Amendment to the Constitution gives the president an emergency brake to stop the default by ignoring what Congress does and borrowing in spite of having reached the debt ceiling. Section 4 of the amendment states that, quote, the validity of the public debt of the United States authorized by law, including debts incurred for payment of pensions and bounties for services in suppressing insurrection or rebellion, shall not be questioned, unquote. President Obama has rejected such claims, the congressional research has said, and other scholars say that by invoking the 14th Amendment in this way, the president would risk breaking other laws. And given that there are a bunch of Tea Partiers out there that want this president impeached, they won't hesitate to say, oh, he's breaking the law, so the president is not going to do that. I don't see that happening. No matter how extreme this situation gets, I just don't see it happening.